Hi. Today we are going to continue our solving trig equations. So really the only thing we're going to do new today is isolate before we solve. So watch what we're going to do. In number 1, I want to get cosine x alone. So what is your first step? Your first step is to add 1 to both sides. What is your next step to get cosine x alone? Divide both sides by 2. All right, now what you're doing, you should recognize that cosine 1/2 is in a 30-60 right triangle, and I would want it to be adjacent over hypotenuse. So what angle would be adjacent over hypotenuse? If you said 60 degrees, you are correct, which that's pi over 3. Now we're going to do all students take calculus. In what quadrant is cosine positive? Well, that's the first and the fourth. So 60 degrees is first quadrant. What angle would have a reference angle of 60 degrees in the fourth quadrant? If you said 300 degrees, you are correct. And so I want you to notice that this says 0 to 2 pi, so my answers need to be in radians. So I would say pi over 3 and 5 pi over 3. All right, let's try number 2. What is your first step to get tangent x alone? You would subtract 1 from both sides. Then you should recognize where tangent is 1 or -1 is going to be in a 45-45 right triangle. So initially, and let's call it maybe the reference angle, is 45 degrees, or pi over 4. All students take calculus. Using Roman numerals, okay, like Roman numeral 1, 2, 3, or 4, in what two quadrants is tangent negative? If you said 2 and 4, you are correct. So I want, and this is best if you can remember how we talked 1 pi over 4, 3 pi over 4, 5 pi over 4, 7 pi over 4. So what is x then? If you said 3 pi over 4 and 7 pi over 4, you are correct. Number 3, what would be your first step? Add 4 to both sides. All right, now this one is a little bit tricky. Do you see that I have secant squared? I would actually need to do plus or minus the square root of 4. Let me go over that again, and I want to take you back in time. Let's suppose I had an equation, and it was y squared equals 4. Remember, this would be plus or minus the square root of 4, which is plus or minus 2. So this is just going back to our quadratics. And that's not a bad review because we have our final exam that includes quadratics. So I get secant x equals plus or minus 2. All right, I'm not quite sure what to do with secant x, but I'm going to play the what do I know game. What do you know about secant x? Hopefully you said it's the reciprocal of cosine. So secant x is 1 over cosine x, and I can actually flip this. Oh, well now take a quick peek at number 1. We already know the reference angle would be 60 degrees, or pi over 3. All students take calculus. Cosine is positive in the first and the fourth, and negative in the second and the third. So I need all the pi over 3's around my unit circle. So here's where doing a combination of the unit circle with my triangles helps. If you needed to, you could do this in degrees and then find each 60 degrees. It just takes you longer if you don't recognize the radians. All right, last one. In number 4, I want you to look back up, and what is the first step in solving a trig equation? Well, it's isolate the trig function. So watch what I'm going to do. I'm going to subtract 3 sine x from both sides. Now what would I do to both sides of the equation to isolate sine x? If you said add 1, you're correct. What is the next step I need to do to isolate sine x? If you said divide by 2, you're correct. All right, so theta prime. Well, I should recognize 1/2 is in a 30-60 right triangle. What would be that reference angle that sine of what angle would give me 1 over 2? If you said 30 degrees or pi over 6, you're correct. All students take calculus using Roman numerals. What are the 2 quadrants that sine is negative? If you said third and fourth, you're correct. So if I know my unit circle, that's 7 pi over 6 and 11 pi over 6. You could change these to degrees and then do 30 degrees into the third quadrant and 30 degrees away from a full rotation. All right, that finishes the notes, and now you can do the 7.6 worksheet number 2.